Please join me in welcoming Rebecca Newberger, Goldstein, and Yael Goldstein Love back to the JCCSF.
Am I using, yes, I am using this and it is on. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you guys all for being here. I was wondering, as Stephanie was speaking, I feel like everyone in this audience knows or ought to know that if a Jewish mother comes on stage and says how extraordinary her daughter's book is, you should discount it immediately. But if a Jewish daughter comes on stage and says how extraordinary her mother's book is, what do you do with that information? You tell me during the Q&A. But this is such an extraordinary book. I think it is so rare for there to be a book that develops a truly original idea and does it with such nuance and lucidity, and is also so moving at the same time. And I think it's fair to say you've been developing these ideas for most of my life. I mean, you started developing them in your novel, The Mind-Body Problem. I was 5, I think, when that book came out. And so it's fair to say I'm quite familiar with these ideas at this point. And I've read this book quite a few times, and we read each other's drafts. And even so, rereading it for this event, I started crying multiple times. I mean, it's just like, something that is so original, so inhabited and rigorously argued, and then makes me cry like 7 or 8 times. What an accomplishment. So I'm so excited to talk to you about it. I was hoping that we could start by talking about the very new idea, the truly original idea, I think, that you develop in this book, which is the concept of mattering full stop, not mattering to an important other, but mattering in the sense of feeling deserving of one's own attention. I hope I'm getting that right. Okay, good. And I was hoping that maybe you could explain that concept to us, and in the process, talk about how you arrived at the concept, either starting at the mind-body problem, or I'm going to try to pull out the personal, going even further back, maybe to Uncle Judah. I don't know.
Yes? Go for it. Okay. Well, yes, thank you so much for the introduction, inviting me here, and for your presence, all of you. And Yael's novels are extraordinary. I am her mother, but I'm a very critical person, too. So I just set out to be a philosopher. I was very interested in science in particular, so I was going to be philosophy of science. And when I was still an untenured, very young professor, this line came to me out of nowhere. I'm often asked what it's like to be married to a genius. Your father was a very smart man, but nobody had ever asked me if I was married to a genius. Excuse me. I knew it was the first line of a novel, and it was very exciting to me. I loved novels. I didn't take them particularly seriously. For me, it was all math, physics, and philosophy. But I set out to see what this character's story was, and I wrote this novel. And, I got a lot of flack for it because young philosophers, untenured philosophers, was a very male-dominated field, and then I go and I write a sexy novel, whose I might as well just have tattooed on my forehead, frivolous. But I owe this obsession with mattering to that novel, so it wasn't such a dumb idea after all. The editor who had acquired that novel at our first meeting said to me, I don't entirely understand your character, your main protagonist. She's very bright, she's good looking, she's very sexually desirable, and she's so unhappy. Why is she so unhappy? And I walked around, thinking about that, and I could tell that first line. I'm often asked what it's like to be married to a genius. There was a whine. There was a kvetch in it, right? So she, And then I heard her, and as you know, you hear your character speaking to you. I heard her say, because I don't feel like I matter in the way that most matters to me. And then she and I sort of collaborated. And, she sort of, we came up with this idea of the mattering map. There are different regions of the mattering map. That was all laid out in this novel. I attributed it to her, and I led to it by her. Different regions, different things matter. And she didn't live, like if she lived in a region of the mattering map where what most mattered to her was to be sexually desirable, she would have felt like she mattered, but that's not where she resided. And this just started this whole process of thinking about mattering and how formative this is. But I went on and did my other work, and then I found out this idea of the mattering map had been adopted by other academic fields, feminism. There
It's an
is
academic field. Well, okay, go get
well, I don't know. You
Organizational
might
psychology.
organizational psychology, and then there was a piece in the Harvard Business School review called "How Mattering Maps." What was this? Challenge the rational agent theory of economics, and quoting from the novel. And I thought, this is a more interesting idea than I was giving it credit for. And so it started to really develop, and it became a whole theory, starting with physics and ending with ethics. I always wanted to do something like that, just following the footsteps of my philosophical hero, Spinoza. And we know a lot more science now, so this is something I really wanted to do. Uncle Judah, I don't know.
You didn't have to pick up the invitation to talk
Yes.
about Uncle Judah in front of this audience.
Yes.
Although it would be fascinating for everyone.
Another thing, well, especially for the psychoanalyst on the stage. But another thing was, as you know, I was born into an Orthodox household, and it was very, very important to me. I made a vow when I was 13 that I would always keep the laws, even though by the age of 13 I was already not a believer, that I would keep the laws until both of my parents were gone. And my mother died when I was 50, and I did. But that transition from being a believer to a non-believer, because one of the things I talk about in the book is, how a believer thinks about mattering and how that's different once you lose it. But that also is something that's played out in my life a lot. 36 Arguments for the Existence of God, a work of fiction is the full title of that book. But that has been a great interest, and now this whole mattering theory has given me a framework in which I can understand it more, understand the loss I felt when I ceased to believe the way I had been brought up to believe. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it precedes even the mattering, The Mind-Body Problem, my first novel, yeah.
And then I wonder, do you want to sort of say a little bit about the longing to matter?
Yes, what is you?
And what it
yes,
is?
What is it? Well, it is, I think, a very deep, but very concealed, a very hidden motive in all of us. The way I define mattering is to be deserving of attention. And that itself is a very interesting concept because it has this word deserving in it. And that's, deserving means, the philosophers call it, it's a normative concept. It's not about is. It's not about facts, it's about ought. It brings values, it brings norms of justification into what it is to pursue a life. And I think that this, I tried to show how it's generated in us, this need to want to justify all the attention that we give to ourselves. You can't get through a human life without paying a tremendous amount of attention to yourself. It takes a tremendous amount of attention to get through a human life. In fact, all creatures who have evolved attention pay the bulk of their attention to trying to survive and to flourish. In us, it's very complicated. But we are the species alone who can step outside of ourselves, look at ourselves, interrogate ourselves, and think, gee, I spend an awful lot of time thinking about myself. Do I really deserve it? What is it about me that could possibly justify this? And that sets up this existential longing in us. It's really about, there's mattering to others, which is terrifically important. We are gregarious creatures. We need other humans in our life, and without that, we suffer the pain of loneliness. I mean, this is a given. But in addition to this, and that's about our relationship with others, extremely important, and psychologists have paid a tremendous amount of attention to it. But in addition to that, there is, this existential kind of mattering that has to do with our relationship with ourselves. And it hasn't been, and it's a philosophical notion. It's not an entirely psychological notion, and it has to do with concepts like meaningfulness, and but it has to do with justifying ourselves to ourselves. And I think that makes us, and I love how much I love animals, and I think animals have their own dignity, but I think there is actually something very special about our species, that we have to, that we all have, all of us, even the ones that whose values are not so very good, but yet they bring values into their life in order to justify themselves. We are value-seeking creatures because of this instinct that we have. And that is, I'd always, we speak about the intrinsic dignity of being human, and it was mushy for me. I couldn't get my analytic philosopher's brain around it. But I think now I understand it, that we take on this burden, not just the burden that's given to us as creatures, like all creatures, but this extra burden of needing to justify the application of these laws of nature in our own case, this special burden that makes living a human life very complicated, very perplexing. But there's something estimable about it. There's something dignified about that. And I think that is, when I end up seeing clearly why we all spout this cliche, which is not a cliche, it's something very deep, that all humans matter equally. Mm-hmm. It's in the basics of all ethics, that all humans are human. It's the very longing to matter that justifies our mattering, our equal mattering. So that's it.
Okay, that's it.
That's it.
Go home.
Yes.
There's such a beautiful you come at this idea of the longing to matter in lots of different ways in the book. You come at it through thermodynamics. You have a great line. We had an argument last night about whether this book was funny. I say it is, and she says it's not. But the line, all tragedies are thermodynamic, that is a funny line.
But it's true, too.
Yeah, it's true, too. And I want to ask you to explain that. But also, because we're in the JCC, I feel very compelled to ask you, you have in the book what I would call a beautiful Devar Torah. And for those of you who don't know, a Devar Torah is sort of an interpretation of something in the Old Testament. Is that what a Devar Torah is? I think that's more or less what a Devar Torah is.
A word about
a Torah. Word about the Torah. Okay.
Yeah.
But you have this beautiful reading of the Garden of Eden, the story of the Garden of Eden, and the story of Cain and Abel, and you sort of retell it, you sort of explain it, what it's really about in terms of these terms of mattering. And I was wondering if you could maybe read or describe, which it looks like you're going to read. If you can just read a little bit.
You warned me that you
I was going to
wanted
warn
me
you
to-
they were bringing this up. I wasn't sure you're going to. Yeah, but if you could just read a little bit of that.
Yeah. By the way, my bookmark is a Mother's Day card that Yael had given me maybe 20 years ago. Everything happens for a reason. That's kind of a Spinoza idea. So anyway. I want to end this chapter with an altogether different way of speaking about our becoming human. It's a story about a garden called Eden. Everything within the garden was there for the taking. Orchards attended themselves, producing figs and pomegranates, olives, almonds, and dates. Animals flitted or lumbered around the two of them, some so large as to shake the ground, but none of these animals threatened the two, the man and the woman. For in that garden it was only the flesh of the fruits and vegetables that were eaten. All the animals were vegetarians, including the man and woman. Birdsong filtered down from the lush foliage above them, along with the sun that dappled the grasses, soft beneath their naked bodies. There must have been much for the two to talk about, everything being so new to them, including themselves. They were delightfully companionable, marveling as to how it seemed that they had been made for each other, since of course they had been. In their innocent nakedness, they would have found their way to pleasure, just as the animals around them did. Nothing had been forbidden to them except for the fruits of the two trees that grew in the very center of the garden. A talking snake is a part of the story. It lures the woman into eating from the tree of knowledge. As a child, this part of the story baffled me. Not the talking snake part. I was perfectly willing to countenance a snake that can speak. No, the baffling part was God's forbidding knowledge, an obvious good to the woman and man. I imagined that the woman found it baffling too, which was what drew her constantly to the tree of knowledge, while the man amused himself in other ways. When the woman tried to discuss the tree of knowledge with him, he told her that it wasn't theirs to think about. Perhaps the snake had overheard the woman trying to discuss the forbidden tree with her mate, so that when the snake found her once again standing under the tree and gazing up, he didn't so much tempt her as just speak aloud what she had already been wondering, which was what could possibly be wrong about knowledge. This story, the first human story of the Bible, belongs to the woman. It's entirely her drama. The Bible pays no attention to the motivation of her mate in choosing to take his first bite. She offers him the fruit, and he bites. Perhaps he bit into the fruit because he couldn't tolerate the woman knowing more than he. That's a funny line. Perhaps he then mansplained to her what she already knew, that they were both naked. In any case, he too had disobeyed and had to share the woman's expulsion from paradise. The Bible presents the exit from paradise as a fall, but not in my retelling. Paradise was living in a purely Darwinian existence, just like all the other animals. Paradise was feeling no need to seek the values that could justify ourselves to ourselves, just as the other animals felt no need. Is that enough?
Sure.
Okay. There's one line I really like. I'm going to do it. Yeah, all right. So by this, they get thrown out. By the sweat of our brow, we toil at trying to convince ourselves that we deserve the self-mattering that makes us who we are. Actually, the original Hebrew literally translates as the sweat of our nose, b'tseas apecha, which sounds far less dignified. The sweat of our nose. The Bible's language proceeds to rub our noses in our lack of dignity, stressing not only the indignity of the end that awaits us, but of the very stuff that makes us, quote, "You will return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return," unquote. Despite the Bible's harsh description of our material being, We left paradise endowed with something estimable. We are dust with dignity. We are dust that does justification, seeking and holding to values, even if they are false values. Our exit from the mythical garden was more than a giant step for humankind. It was a giant step into humankind.
Oh. I am really glad you decided to keep reading that part. That was beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I wonder if now is maybe a good time, as we're thinking about this giant step into humankind, to talk about the varieties of mattering projects that you describe in the book. I mean, you just start to limn them and describe, that there are an infinite multiplicity of these.
Yes.
But I wonder if you can sort of talk a little bit about the mattering regions that you describe,
Yes.
and then various ways that people arrive at their mattering projects or perhaps fail to.
So I do think, when we make this, this when we confront ourselves and our own self-mattering and feel called upon to justify it, that we take up what I call mattering projects. They can change in the course of our lives. And it is an obsession of mine. I have spoken to, oh my gosh, since I started thinking about this, probably hundreds of people. Not in a research kind of way, it's just fascinated me. I'm also very, very shy. And so this is a very good way of and I like people to talk to me, and I don't have to talk too much to them. And this is a very good way of getting everybody feels like they matter when there's this person who wants to know how they are going about their lives to feel like they matter. And I've learned the kinds of questions that can get at it. I mean, just a fast story. I was once waiting for my present husband in a hotel lobby, and Manhattan hotel lobby. And a guy comes up, this was years ago, and he's trying to pick me up. And I started talking to him about his life and how he goes about it and, what gets him out of bed in the morning and, to push on into his future. He was a pickup artist. He was and it was so interesting, and he had his stats, how many women he picked up over the course of his life or over the past week, and he read books about this, and there are gurus of being a pickup artist, and who were his heroes. Every mattering region has its heroes. So it's just, there are so many ways, and now sometimes Steve, my present husband, will come home and say, I met somebody. There's a new region on the mattering map. You're not going to believe it, right? So this is just fascinating. But, so there, as you say, there are just and the creativity of our species in answering, responding, appeasing this hidden longing of ourselves to justify our lives. We don't want our lives to be a waste. None of us wants our lives to be a waste. But the thing is, you can become so sure that this is the way to do it that you don't even notice it anymore. And you also think that everybody else should do just as you do. And that's how we get divided. But what I've noticed is that there are 4 general strategies, and I came to call them the 4 continents of the mattering map. There's actually, I did this on the train coming home after I gave a talk about this, a sketch of the mattering map at the beginning of the book. So these are the 4 continents, surrounded by the sea of longing, because it's a longing, because we never know. We never know if we're going about it the right way. And if we're honest with ourselves, we recognize this. And the 4 strategies are the transcenders, the socializers, the heroic strivers, and the competitors. And what I notice when I talk to people about it, I can often tell right away where of the 4 continents they reside on by how they interpret the question of mattering. So a transcender which is a religious or a spiritual response to this, what I was for the first 13 years of my life, so I know it well from the inside. It's a kind of cosmic mattering, that they matter to the transcendent being whom they believe, created heaven and earth, the laws of nature, and the moral order within. And this is a very satisfying, a very large sense of mattering, because it is, that which created the universe intentionally created me. I have a role to play in the narrative of eternity. It doesn't get bigger than that. It's extremely big, and it's a loss when you lose it. But it's also it can be very, very fervent. And I have been asked many times by those whose sense of mattering is this cosmic mattering, this transcendent mattering. Why do you live? Why do you pursue your life? What gets you up in the morning? What gives you the impetus? You ultimately really don't matter. You don't matter to the universe at large. When you're gone, and that's true. So this is a very grand sense of mattering. Socializers, they really do understand these questions of mattering as mattering to others. But I distinguish between two types, the intimate and the non-intimate socializers. As I said, we're all want people in our lives, our intimate circle, our social circle, the people who most matter to us, and hopefully we matter to them. For some socializers, that is how they answer, how they matter, the existential longing. There are my children. There's my lover or spouse, my friends, my community members, my neighbors, my colleagues. It's not necessarily love. Sometimes they're pain, but they would pay me attention. I paid them attention. But then there are the kind of socializers who it's not really their intimate circle that they want to matter to. We'll consider, for example, the desire for fame. It's a very, very strong motivation in people's lives. To want to be famous, which means to want to matter to a bunch of strangers, sometimes to the detriment of the people who are in your life. I know people, many people, and in fact there have been studies of millennials, the statistics are amazing how much they want to be famous, influencers, famous, whatever, to the detriment of close, intimate relationships. So there's a very, very strong, and it's interesting. It's a bunch of strangers. What did I say? But anyway, I find it a very interesting way to answer this existential need. Some cynic, I can't remember who it was, it said that to be famous is to be paid a lot of attention by people of whom you are happy that you needn't pay any attention. So it's very cynical, or to whom you would. Anyway, so those socializers, and it seems from my non-scientific observations that most people are socializers, and they really understand when I ask these questions of mattering is mattering to others. And most of the books that are written about mattering understand mattering. In this way, there's a book by a psychologist called The Psychology of Mattering. He understands it entirely as mattering to others. Then there are heroic strivers. Heroic strivers don't care about mattering to others. They don't care about mattering to God. They have some standards of excellence in mind that they need to approach, to work towards, maybe to realize, but in order to reconcile themselves with themselves. And these standards can be intellectual, artistic, athletic, entrepreneurial, military, or ethical. And it really is a matter of making progress towards these goals. Yeah, most of the people I know are heroic strivers. I'm an academic, it's not surprising. And as well as a novelist also, right? Not surprising. And then there are the competitors. And those are the people who, when I start talking to them, they always get a little uncomfortable because how they understand mattering is in zero-sum terms. Mattering means mattering more than. And to the extent that others matter, it's taking something away from them. It might be in every sphere. They need to matter more than others in every sphere. We've all become very familiar with the psychology of one such person who's constantly in our face, right? Everything. Nobody, best general, best architect, best whatever, artist, best president. Anyway, or it could be in their particular sphere. So there's someone I know who is a scientist. He's in fact a Nobel laureate. And another friend said to me once about him, he was happy for all of 15 minutes when he got the phone call from Stockholm. And then he realized other people have also gotten the Nobel laureate. And it's like, yes, that is him. That is him. It's very hard to be such a person. You're always in an adversarial position with your fellow humans. And the last kind of competitors that I've noticed, very interested in, and worked very hard to get to know, are those who are the group competitors. They belong to the superior group that matters more than other groups, and to the extent that these other groups are gaining some kind of mattering, it's taking it away from them, and so this leads to, racism, classism, sexism, all sorts of isms that we haven't even gotten around to, jingoism, that we haven't, anti-Semitism, all sorts of, can't forget about that one, all sorts of isms that we haven't even gotten around to naming. And I really wanted to get to know such a person, and so I wrote to certain incels and certain neo-Nazis, and surprisingly, none of them wrote back to me. None of them answered me.
Except one.
Except one, yes, Frank Mink, and he's an ex-neo-Nazi skinhead, and he. It's a fascinating story, but he understood exactly what I was talking about when we were talking about mattering. He grew up in terrible circumstances, terrible family life, didn't feel like he mattered, he would walk home from school and want to be hit by a car because in its worst, if the mattering instinct is not somehow appeased, severe depression can set in. And then he met some neo-Nazi skinheads, and they said, look in the mirror. You will see how much you matter. You are a white, male, American, heterosexual, and these other people, these mud people, is what they call them, are taking this away from you. And it became his mattering project, along with these others, to put the mattering order to rights. And he did terrible things. He'd be the first to tell you he did terrible things. But he's come out of it. And should I give the punchline away? He's now a Jew. The man is really doing penance, right? So fascinating, but it was so interesting to get the inside view. I mean, it was my hypothesis that this was functioning, and if you read their stuff, the people who go and shoot up, the rampage murderers, and I went through all of their manifestos, and it's over and over again. You don't know my name, but you will. You will remember me for the rest, and they'll give up their lives for that, right? To somehow matter. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it can lead to very dangerous things.
I wonder if that is sort of a good place to transition to where you end up in the end, toward the end of the book, where you talk about getting mattering wrong and getting mattering right.
Yeah.
And maybe even telling us a little bit more about Frank's story and how he started getting mattering right is a good way to get there, because I think that's such a fascinating part of the story, is like, how did this man get
Yes.
from a place of having hatred and mattering more than other people be his whole reason for being,
Yes.
to being a person who's trying to right the wrongs of the world.
That's right. Yes, he has become what I call an ethical heroic striver, another word for which is a saint, really. So, yes, so Frank, as I said, very bad circumstances, and for somebody to give you an ideology that explains your bad feelings and someone to blame. It's like, sending out a rope to a drowning person and they grab it with their, I think he was the one who told me that. Mm-hmm. But gave me that metaphor. He went to jail at the age of 17, and it was an adult jail. And but it wasn't so bad. He said at least he never got raped, because there were plenty of neo-Nazis in jail, and the word had come. He became a big organizer of the neo-Nazi movement. He was a legend, and he's a very smart guy, and very charming, quite good looking as well. So, what was that? Anyway, gave him certain charisma. But so he was taken care of in jail. But he was upset there. He was worried about that his girlfriend, while he was inside, was going to cheat on him, and he bonded with two young black guys, and he became really close.
Who were also worried that their girlfriends.
Exactly. They bonded. There ain't nothing more human than two guys inside worrying about the girls outside. He told me there ain't nothing more human. So that's probably true. So he lost that, mm-hmm. But and then he got out. And he had a great big swastika on the side of his neck, and tattoos on his knuckles spelling out skinhead, so that when he beat people to a bloody pulp, they'd know why. And but he still, so he couldn't. When we hear the old, his old comrades talking about the mud people. It didn't resonate with him anymore. He said they sound like fucking idiots. But he still hated the Jews more, In fact, he said he hated them with a vengeance stronger than ever. It was the one thing that connected him to his old beliefs. And then a guy, nobody would hire him. He was an 8th grade dropout, an ex-felon, with a swastika tattooed on the side of his neck. Nobody would hire this guy, except this Jewish guy, an antique dealer, who treated him, with utmost respect. It was actually when it came around for his first paycheck, the guy wasn't there. He said, he's going to Jew me. He's going to Jew me. And those of you who don't know what that means cheat you. And then, not only did he gave him a bonus, he hired him, and he treated him with real respect. And that's what broke through the ideology, and he just had to rethink everything. And he said, when he would march through the streets and people would, when he was a Nazi, and people would hurl epithets and rocks and bottles, he would never think, I ought to stop and rethink my premises here. But when somebody actually treated him like he mattered, with the dignity of a human being, that was able to break through. And that's what he's devoted his life now to trying to do, to break through these ideologies. So, yeah, so there are good ways and bad ways. Don't become a Nazi. But, the first editor for this book, who we parted ways. But she wanted, tell people how to live. You know, you're a philosopher, you've been thinking about this all the time. Tell us, give us a self-help book, tell us how to live. How can one possibly do that? We go about this in very different ways. I can't be a transcender. I would have wanted to be a transcender. I didn't want to be different from my family. I would like to be a saint. I am not a saint. That's not how I go about my Mattering project. There are, and I would not ask you to take on my Mattering project, you know, which is to try to understand people's Mattering. That's not, this is deep diversity, and our diversity has to be respected and recognized. And this is the deepest, most important thing for us to figure out about ourselves, to do the right thing for us. So I would never want to universalize about this. Our notions of Mattering have to be wide enough to take us in the richness of our diversity, which is wonderful. But I'm not a relativist either. There are better and worse ways of doing this. And I mean, the first thing is whatever your way of servicing, appeasing your longing to matter can't be at the expense of other people's Mattering. That's just basic, right? The way to achieve your Mattering can't be at the expense of making other people feel like they don't matter. I'm actually just thinking, you know, right now about, you know, I'm staying in a hotel in Berkeley. I mean, it's just amazing how everybody you meet somehow, or maybe it's just me, this is my framework, but anyway, the woman comes in to clean my room, right? And then she asks me, I don't know how she knew, she asked me if I'm a teacher, and I said yes. And she, as I said, I mean, her English was better than my Spanish, but her English was very rudimentary. She came from Nicaragua. Me too. Turns out she was a mathematician. She taught for 25 years in Nicaragua, and she is now, as she said, now I'm cleaning. Now it's housework. You know, this sense of, you know, she had prepared for her Mattering project, and then here she is, you know, being made to feel, okay, I'm going to start crying, but being made to feel as if she didn't matter. And our society is doing this. It's doing this to people in more fierce ways, more brutal ways than ever. And this is incredibly wrong. So there are worse and better ways of doing it. I call on thermodynamics to explain one of the ways that we can, something that I use to assess how well I'm living my life and how well other people are living our lives. The second law of thermodynamics says that entropy is always increasing. Entropy is nature's scorecard for disorder. The more entropy there is, the more disorder there is, and in a system, the more disorder there is, the less useful work can be done. All of life is in resistance to the second law of thermodynamics. All of the laws of biology are actually derived from the importance of living systems to resist entropy. And everything worth living for is in the direction of life and against entropy, most importantly out of all, life, the life of ourselves, which comes naturally to us, that we work against that. All living systems do. But the life of all things, the life of our planet. But knowledge is better than ignorance. Kindness is better than cruelty. Care is better than inflicting suffering. Clarity is better than confusion. Beauty is better than ugliness. All the things that are better depend on our resisting the pull of entropy. Entropy will get us. I mean, big news, we're all going to die. And that entropy get us in the end. Entropy is going to get the universe. The universe will end in what physicists call the heat death. But until then, we resist. We resist. And to make it our lives best worth living, be living for life and all the things that life can be. I'll just end, with the saying that I think says it all. It was a saying of an ancient rabbi, Rabbi Hillel, first century, one of the Tanaim, and he said, if I'm not for myself, then who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, then what am I? And if not now, when? That says it all. I say it in fancy thermodynamic language, but that really says it all. I mean, that is what it is to live, to minister to our longing to matter in the best way possible.
Well, that's a good place to open it up, I think, to all of you to ask any questions. Or does it feel okay right now?
It does. Okay. It does.
All right. You mentioned that you have suggestions about how to ask questions about people's mattering projects. Do you have any suggested questions?
Yes, that's a really good question. And it depends a lot on the person. I mean, one of the things I've really been impressed with how different we are. Same longing, such different expressions. So I do try to get a sense, but it is the kind of thing of, do you ever feel like you've made a big mistake in your life, or what kind of situation has made you feel that way? As if what could make you feel like a failure, like you've gotten it all wrong? But also, what keeps you going? It's very hard to be human. What is it that keeps you going? What makes you feel like you're making progress in your life? It's this kind of, so they're kind of existential. Do you ever feel like life is meaningless? What do you do about that? It's that kind of question. But I modify it in terms of how defended the person seems, and how sophisticated, for sure. But somehow or other, I pretty much always end up with some insight. And it is just, as novelists, we're so interested in or I guess all of us are interested as readers of novels. We're all so interested in what it's like to be someone other than oneself. What is this inner subjectivity like that other people inhabit? And I have found that so much of that depends on how they're responding to the mattering instinct. I mean, are there goals that they set for themselves? Is it the close, intimate relationships? Is it adversarial? I mean, these are such deep differences. Or is it God? Or, some kind of spiritual connection? They're just the deepest differences between us. So it's a very enlightening way of trying to imagine your way into the lives of others, which is so fascinating. Does that help at all?
I do also think asking, does life ever feel meaningless, is a great way to wake somebody up.
It is.
Right when they've woken up, you just come right in with that. That was where my mind went. I just imagine that as an alarm clock.
Clearly, you speak from some sort of
the
personal
gravity to this conversation.
Yeah. Did I ever wake you up saying, "Is your life meaningless?"
Not to my recollection.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask about something that you said towards the beginning. If you can kind of explain it more. You
Yes.
said something like the desire to matter justifies mattering, and maybe you said something about justifies equal mattering. I'm not sure if I just added that. So even if you didn't say that, I'm
No,
curious if you think about
yes.
that. And then also how that fits with the idea that there are better and worse ways of mattering.
Yes. Wonderful. Yes. Yeah. So, it's sort of taken as a truism. And in fact, in most ethical theories, utilitarianism, deontic theories, Kantianism, these are two major differences in ethical theories, that all people matter, that there is some kind of intrinsic worth to all humans. And it's often when philosophers ask, what is it that gives it to us? They're philosophers. Reason. It's reason, right? Of which philosophers are the best, right? They can do it better than others. But it's our capacity to reason. And I don't know, I've always found that as much as I revere reason, and certainly that has a lot to do with my mattering project, I don't know that that is what makes human life so it's so poignant and so precious. And as I say, I love animals very, very much, but there's something uniquely precious about human life. I think most of us and most ethical theorists recognize. And to me, it comes from this longing to matter, which is the capacity to step outside the self-mattering, which is it's just our default. Of course we matter to ourselves. How can we pursue our lives without mattering to ourselves, without wanting to survive and to flourish to the best of our abilities? And it's, we're always thinking about ourselves. So there's the default network mode that cognitive neuroscientists talk about when you're not paying any attention to the external stimuli. You're just kind of fantasizing and daydreaming. What are you fantasizing and daydreaming about? They've told us, they've done studies of this, yourself, right? You're fantasizing. It's just our default, right? And all creatures who have attention, I mean, they're not going to be, maybe they fantasize, maybe our chimp relatives fantasize. I don't know what it's like to be a chimp. Would love to know. But but only we, have this capacity for self-reflection so that we can step outside of this default self-mattering and ask, well, what is it about me? If the measure of how much I think something matters is how much attention I feel it to be deserving of, it would seem that I think that I am the thing that matters the most in all the universe because I pay incessant, and this is for all of us, incessant attention to myself. But short of lunacy, we all know that that's not true, right? And that short of lunacy gives us this longing to somehow justify it to ourselves, to somehow make all the attention that we have to give ourselves commensurate with how much we think we deserve that attention. And it may be because you feel more powerful, and maybe because you feel smarter, it may be, maybe because you think you belong to the master race, whatever. But that move is itself something so special, and that very longing, I think, holds the great poignancy of just pursuing a human life. Wherever there's a human life, there is that longing to matter. That's very poignant, and I think very precious. And it makes us something new in this universe. We bring values. Sometimes bad values, but we bring values into this business of leading our lives in order to justify ourselves. And that seems to me to be more than reason in terms of ending up with a truism that all human lives matter. It does. It leads to great achievements. It leads to great atrocities because it's the core of us. It's so human, and that's what we are. We are creatures who can achieve amazing things and also atrocious things. That's our history, from the very beginning, and continuing into this day. So anyway, yeah. Did I answer? What? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There is this great difference, and some really are better than others. There are so many ways. Here's another saying I love. I don't just quote Jewish thinkers, but the Sufi mystic Rumi. Let the beauty you love be what you do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel down and kiss the ground. This is beautiful. Yes, there are many ways we can do this, and some very bad ways.
Sure, thanks. Thank you. I have a question about the map.
Yes.
Because I'm wondering, because you were describing that, people are located on the map, but it seems like you could be in many places at once. Can you speak about that? And I'm also curious, like the size of different regions in the map. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I actually did some research on the size of. I used AI. Confession. It can be good. It can be good. I mean, it was really surprising, the figures they came up with. And AI had a lot of opinions about this. But I think you can be on several regions at once. And if you're, for example, a heroic striver, you may, these standards of excellence that you want to fulfill or asymptotically approach, might be intellectual and artistic and ethical, but I think the continents are different. This is a sort of an empirical hypothesis. I've just been non-scientifically talking to people, reading a lot of biographies, this sort of thing, trying to get a sense of this. So it's, this is an empirical hypothesis. It could very well be falsified. But my sense is, if you're, for example, a transcender, and really the way you think of your life, the way you minister to this longing to matter is really because of your, your religious/spiritual beliefs. You may also be a heroic striver, and I found with transcenders that there are, different types. So some express it very much as socializers. They want, they're priests or rabbis. Their connections with others in their flock, or ministering to other people. That's the way it's expressed. But really, when it comes to their mattering, when I say what would make you feel like you've gotten your life wrong, that you really, that it's losing faith in their transcendent beliefs. And so we're all, in some sense, socializers. I mean, we all need people in our lives. I've met a few people who don't. Mostly mathematicians, real loners, and but certain mystics, for example, who really don't need any close, relationships, and in fact try to shed those. Spinoza, in some sense, is such a person. So there are. But for the most part, we all need, and so often when I talk about this, people say, "Well, I'm a socializer, but I'm also heroic." But are you a socializer in the sense that you need these close relationships with people in your life, which most of us do. But how do you go about ministering to the to your mattering? It's so. So far, I'm finding, that if I push, that there are people. Really, their core mattering is in one or another of these continents, although when it comes to the regions, there can be several. You've got your main house and you got your vacation home or something like that. I don't know. Yes. But anyway, it's just the mattering map. It's a metaphor. And if you don't like it, blame it on my fictional character. She was the one who came up with it. To me, it's somewhat explanatory, but yeah.
Thank you for this. This has been so beautiful.
Thank you.
I am curious how one finds their mattering, like, patterns, right? Like, is it something that's developed relationally? Is it instinctual? Is it given to us on the day we're born?
Oh, yeah.
Like, where does it come from? And how do we know if like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, what is, where do I fit on the map? And is it like, am I conditioned by my family, by my relationships to think I want one type of mattering, but like secretly I actually, really some part of me wants another type of mattering?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I profile, there are a lot of stories in the book because theory is theory, but it's really how it's played out in people's lives that matter, right? It's really, and so, there are a lot of stories in the book that try to demonstrate this variety, but one way or another, trying to appease this longing. And some people, find out that their mattering project really is not doing it for them, or is morally wrong, as my friend Frank, the ex-Nazi, found out that this was just fundamentally wrong. But often, and I've had this so much, with students, with graduate students, who are, their life was, to be, a philosopher or something, and then it's not going well. And sometimes it is the very painful job for a professor to tell a graduate student that and you could be wrong, of course, but none of us are infallible, but I see a lot of frustration and disappointment ahead. And a lot of our mattering projects, we can tolerate a good deal of frustration and disappointment. But you want to be making some progress, and for it not to be all frustration and disappointment. And, and sometimes that's wrong, and one has to. But I tell the story about people who, midlife discovered that this was not the mattering project for them, and and sometimes it's your family, or, who's pushed it on you, or sometimes it's the culture. I think right now there are. And this is backed up by empirical evidence, that there are a tremendous number of young people who really feel the only way to matter is to be famous, to be an influencer, and to and this is something, or others, that the only way is to be powerful. I would say, and I say this as someone who is not a believer and who has gotten every award that the organized non-religion gives out, the Richard Dawkins Award and the American Atheist Award, and I've gotten them all. But I say this as such a person. The fact that religion and spirituality has ceased to function as a way of really answering this question in the deep way that it used to, has left a kind of mattering vacuum. And, the culture has filled in, more money, more power, more fame. This is a terrible answer because it means that most people cannot achieve mattering. Most people cannot be famous, cannot be powerful, cannot be zillionaires. And so, and money as a way of distinguishing between who matters and who doesn't. This is a terrible way for society to go about this. We need to change society so that most people feel like they matter, for the simple reason, because they do. They do. This is fundamental. So I think I strayed far from your question.
It was perfect.
I think I did.
Project. I think that's
Yeah. I mean, it is for everybody, I think, to think about. What is your mattering project? Is it serving you well? Is it serving the world well? If I'm not for myself, then who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, then what am I? These are the questions to ask ourselves.
We've got time for one last question back here.
Yeah, thanks so much again. Do you believe that there's remaining work to be done in the philosophical domain or mathematical or physics having to do with mattering? In other words, it was really nice that, we know about thermodynamics and we can sort of rest on that as a way to build up all these other concepts.
Yeah.
That without that, we'd be a little more lost. Maybe part of my personal mattering project is, do I want to go after something like that? If there's a there to be had. Otherwise, to do something more practical or, do you think there's more actual philosophy left in the objective sense? Or is it more subjective? Is it more the project of each of us doing it for ourselves, which is a more personal thing?
Yeah, I think, for some of us, increasing the amount of knowledge of our species seems like a worthwhile thing to do. And but our talents, our passions, our interests, and our cultures, and our autobiographies, are very, very different. So, for some of us, life would not be worth living. It would feel like one had wasted one's finite time here. If one didn't add something in the way of knowledge, that's a good thing. I think, that's what some people, need in order to feel like their lives are worth living. And I think it has given something to our species at large. For some people, it's, adding more beauty, artists, writers, poets. Again, who's to say that everybody should become that? No, it's, where one's interests or passions or talents lie, but it's something that will help these people want to pursue their life. And in the meanwhile, adding more beauty, that seems a good thing. More justice, that seems, for others, that seems, a good thing. But yeah, I would say, yeah, knowledge is a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. And it means that we have overcome our subjective way of looking at things and are striving for more objectivity. And I think that is, in fact, a moral thing. So, you're not going to find a philosopher damning knowledge.
Taking a firm stand in favor of knowledge seems like a good place to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my darling.
Books are for sale in the back, thanks to Books Inc. And thank you guys all for being such a wonderful and engaged audience. Sorry we didn't get to more questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.